tattooers work based on commission. No one's on an hourly rate. It's a big ask to say, hey, can you stop tattooing for a whole day or a whole week and watch me tattoo and not get paid?
What's up, everybody? Most people, as you may know, think that getting into an apprenticeship is the golden ticket into getting into the tattoo industry. Now, with that being said, they feel that until they go out and then they're stuck in a 2-year unpaid apprenticeship doing all the things that you don't want to do, like mopping floors, cleaning toilets, scheduling appointments for all the people in the shop, and making no money throughout that time. If you're new to the channel, I'm Brandon from Tattooing 101, and I'm here with Nathan and Jay. Also, a free way for you to help support the channel is just like and subscribe. It's an easy way for you to help us be able to make more exciting content for you in the future.
And if you've done a tattoo apprenticeship in the past, that potentially maybe it has or it hasn't worked out, let us know what your experience has been like in the comments. Love to hear what it's been like from your guys' experience, and just to kind of see if it lines up with what we're talking about here today.
So what are we talking about today?
Cool. So we're just going to lay out the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to tattooing apprenticeships, right? Like you said, a lot of aspiring artists, when they get into this, they think as soon as they get that position in a shop, it's done. Like they're going to be a professional tattoo artist, right? And they kind of just don't know what they're walking into.
Yeah.
On this episode, we're just going to walk through what to expect, what the day-to-day stuff looks like, how it's going to affect your life outside the shop.
Yes.
Okay, because it definitely has an impact, on your social life, your health,
your mental health,
your financial situation,
pretty much everything,
and also how it's structured. Okay,
yes.
and what the actual learning journey is going to look like for you inside of a tattoo shop.
And that way you'll kind of be able to understand all of the steps to be able to get into that apprenticeship and be ready to hit the ground running. So with that, what would you say the first thing to know if you're getting into an apprenticeship is, Jay?
I would say for most people, it's considering whether an apprenticeship is even the right path for you. Like I think a lot of people, due to just how things have been in the past, think that getting an apprenticeship is the only way to start tattooing.
Yeah.
So I would just think first and foremost, like becoming aware that there's another path for you. You can come in as an artist versus being an apprenticeship, right? I think it's the first thing to kind of think about.
I would say that is obviously the best path to go.
Becoming in as an artist?
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. You kind
absolutely.
of skip all that negative stuff and go straight into making money right away.
Not so much, I guess there's that, but there's also, an apprenticeship is severely dragged out.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to be doing a lot of things that have nothing to do with learning how to tattoo.
Yeah.
Things like answering phones, mopping floors, cleaning. Like most of the time, you're going to be cleaning.
Yeah.
Which realistically is an important thing to learn. Sanitation in a tattoo studio is something that you absolutely need to learn. But doing that for 3 years, not tattooing, isn't helping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say there's some maybe rare cases where an apprenticeship does make sense. Like if there's an artist who you really want to learn from, like we talked about in the last video, I was already tattooing 10 plus years, had my own clientele, was helping grow shops, but I wanted to learn a certain style of tattooing in Japan. And so did like an informal apprenticeship under him to learn a specific style. But that was kind of in addition to, on the side of, being an artist in our own studios. So there's an option as well.
Yeah. And an apprenticeship can be good if you find the right studio and the right mentor. But, unfortunately, the way it is, again, the guys that are really, really good that you want to learn from are often so busy tattooing that they don't have time to teach. And the guys that are sitting around that have time to teach, you may or may not necessarily want to kind of learn from.
And that just comes with research, Before you just jump into a studio, do your research, make sure it's a place that you want to get into and actually can learn at.
Yeah.
I would say that's the main distinction, right? Is that if you're just looking to become a tattoo artist, broad stroke, and you just need the information in terms of like basic sanitation, basic composition, basic design, basic techniques that you can really learn from any shop, then you can learn that. I mean, here on this channel is a good place. Artist Accelerator is a good place. Unless you need like a very certain or specific skill set, I wouldn't seek out an apprenticeship these days,
Absolutely.
honestly.
Yeah. So I think it's important to have a clear understanding of what an apprenticeship actually is. Like people think that when you go into a shop and you are an apprentice, you're going to be sitting at a desk and there's going to be a mentor right in front of you and he's going to be watching you tattoo from start to finish of the day, critiquing your work, giving you, tips on how to improve, when in reality, it's not like that at all, okay? Tattooers work based on commission. No one's on an hourly rate. So every tattoo artist in that shop is making money when they tattoo, right? So it's a big ask to say, hey, can you stop tattooing for a whole day or a whole week and watch me tattoo and not get paid? Because they got bills too. So typically what ends up happening is you're kind of just left to fend for yourself. You'll be in the tattoo shop and you can watch the other guys tattoo and you can ask questions, which is kind of a hard way to learn because you don't even know what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? When you're watching someone tattoo, you don't know the difference between, a bug pin liner, a tight liner, a long taper liner, or anything like that. You don't even know the right questions to ask. You can say, oh, hey, why'd you use the big needle? And you have to kind of learn like that. So you've got to still kind of, in a way, figure things out for yourself.
Yeah, and I'd say that's why a lot of, the studios that we've heard from actually have their apprentices go through a program as well, because that way it does give them the ability to learn all the knowledge with still being into an apprenticeship without them having to spend all that time teaching them themselves. So it is super beneficial. And we have a ton of students that are actually in an apprenticeship that are going through the program as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Even helping bringing the information to the shop owner and helping the shop grow in that way too. I will say, watch out too. Like, it seems like it's getting a little more friendly these days. But during a few of my different apprenticeships, like that was how we learned. It's sort of like through osmosis. You have to like politely and very quietly look over somebody's shoulder as they're tattooing. Maybe the shop owner's cool with it, but if there's a half dozen other artists there with conflicting personalities, I've been fed so much misinformation in my own shop because they're thinking like, well, once Jay starts tattooing, that's clients he's taken away from me. It's that old school like scarcity mindset. So be careful of that too.
Yeah, it's a different kind of world being in a tattoo studio because you don't realistically know if the information is correct or not until you do figure out the correct information. So that's one of I would say almost the negatives of getting into like a apprenticeship and going through the day-to-day stuff is you realistically don't know if it's the wrong information. I was the same. I was fed so much wrong information my first one.
Yeah.
And until I knew better, I thought that was right.
Yeah.
And generally, you can, typically the better the mentor's work is, the higher probability the information is correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
But another thing that sort of doesn't get talked about a lot is there's definitely some well-defined incorrect ways to tattoo.
Absolutely.
But there's also many right ways to do something. Like there's not one way to pull a line.
And that might not work for you.
Yeah.
So even if you're learning from one person, it might not be the most efficient way for you to do that. That depends on multiple things like hand speed, machine you're using.
Not only that, but like there's a lot of artists that drag their liner needles, like they kind of move their hand backwards when they're lining. With me, when I'm pulling on, I like to, I still pull the line, but I pull it towards myself. I don't like dragging my hand.
Yeah, I like to
that.
face the needle in the direction that I'm going, the angle, so it kind of penetrates the skin a little bit easier. But there are other options.
But the lines still come out crisp as hell. But it just, I don't like doing it that way. So,
I'm just more comfortable another way.
Yeah, if I would have only been shown that way to do a line because I didn't have access to any other resources, then it's like, oh, that's going to slow me down because that way doesn't feel comfortable for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it might just be something that you're kind of focusing on one thing instead of like trying to incorporate other different ways of doing things, which there are plenty.
Yeah.
With that being said, what would you say the day-to-day life of an apprentice is? I know from personal experience, things have kind of changed now. I'll kind of go through the day-to-day life now, and then we could start broadening into how it used to be.
Okay.
So you could kind of get an idea of how things have changed throughout the years. So obviously, Zach is my apprentice right now. Day-to-day stuff, he does get into the studio, mops the floor, make sure everything's ready to rock and roll for the day. With that, we do alternate cleaning the bathrooms and everything. That's not something that's kind of stuck on one specific person. I feel like as a tattoo studio, you kind of need to come together and do all of those things and not kind of have it all focused on one person, which is a big change from how it used to be.
I was going to say, you're a nice guy, man. That's very nice of you.
It's not even like being a nice guy though, but it's amazing for retention because there's so many old heads that complain. It's just like, I'm done teaching apprentices because as soon as they learn how to tattoo, they just leave. It's just like, well, what do you expect? You treated them like crap for 4 years. And then the day that they no longer need you think they're just going to hang around and give you half their money? Hell no, they're going to bounce.
So I'm a big fan of lead by example. So if you are over anyone and you're telling them to do something, but if you don't have the ability to do that or do that yourself, then you have no reason to ask that of anyone else.
It's just good leadership.
Also, with that being said, a lot of apprenticeships that I've been through, I had to set up all of their stuff whenever I was tattooing. Me personally, I like to set up my stuff. It's something that I'm comfortable with. At this point of life, I don't even have to think about it, right? I just do it from repetitive motion. You know, a lot of people like their stuff set up and cleaned up and all that stuff, but I personally enjoy doing that myself just because I know what I want. It does kind of help them be able to learn how to set up effectively, which I do understand, which is important, but with me, not really something I have them do.
Yeah.
I think that there's a bit of excessive repetition
Yeah.
in some apprenticeships. Like, man, how many times do you need to set up a station to learn how to set up a station?
Yeah.
Do you really need to do it 1,000 times? Or maybe, you know, just 50. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it's not that difficult. It's a simple step-by-step process. Once you learn how to do it, you know, anything else is just kind of overkill, right?
Yeah, and realistically, as long as you're wrapping everything, like that's the main things. If you put out another like a wrong cartridge, you just change it out. Like that's not a detrimental thing for, you know, anything.
Yeah.
The main things are obviously being sanitary and cleanliness and everything. Let's get into some of the stories that we have, how apprenticeships used to be.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess for me, I started out doing 6 days a week. It went down to 5 days a week after it was like a bit of a rebellion in the tattoo shop. We all kind of got tired of being like, I don't know, it just sort of felt like our whole lives were literally in that studio, and our one day off on Sunday we were drawing designs the next day. We had no lives outside of tattooing. But yeah, I was doing 6 days a week I'll get there at 9 a.m. and I'd leave there at like, you know, usually say 6, 7 p.m. And then on Fridays we'd leave at about midnight. Yeah. So it was like, I'm doing 50 to 60 hours a week. The one thing that comes to mind is that pretty much everything or anything bad that happened, it's always your fault. I remember, you know, I used to have to set up everyone's stations, which is fine. Like, I didn't mind doing it. But my mentor's his clipcord, like, it broke.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that happens all the time, right? And, you know, he comes up to me, he like pulls me outside and just like, man, it's like you're, you know, throwing around my equipment, like breaking my stuff. It's like, man, you're gonna have to pay for that, like if it breaks. And it's like, man, I barely even touched it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And those clip cords back then, they break all the time.
Oh, they still do.
So cheap, yeah.
You know, pretty much anything bad that happens is your fault. If there's a double booking in the calendar that was made by the artist at their house, you know, through their own social
Yeah, you
media
should have caught it.
that didn't even go through the shop, that's your fault. You should have caught that.
Yeah.
You should have preemptively checked the calendar or even asked the artist if they had anything on that week to make sure that there wasn't a double booking.
Yeah,
But
man.
you're like the scapegoat
Yeah.
of the tattoo studio.
It gives you a pretty tough skin, right?
Yeah, it definitely did.
It does, yes. Maybe that's why there's so many, like, you know, I would say aggressive people in the tattoo industry is like the old school guys who have gone through that. They feel like they have to kind of be tough or be jerks now to kind of like have that defense mechanism.
Yeah, and almost, you know, some of the gatekeeping is also from that. Like, we're different kind of dudes, right? Like, we're trying to proactively stop those things so it doesn't happen. Like, we've been through that so other people don't have to. But some of those people take it the other way to where it's like, I went through that, they have to go through
Now
that.
you should too.
Yeah.
That's only fair.
That's the thing, it didn't make me a better artist.
No.
You know, in tattooing, the most important thing is, can you do good tattoos?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what an apprenticeship should be about. All this, you know, that hardening up that the old heads do, you only need that if you're doing crappy tattoos and you've got to deal with difficult situations with clients.
That's true.
Because you did a busted tattoo. But if you work hard, you know, you're a decent dude or decent, you know, gal or whatever, and you're just doing good tattoos, you'll never have those angry customers that are coming in that demanding refunds or anything like that.
That's a good point.
And you won't need that, you know, that macho, I'm a tough guy kind of thing because it just never comes up.
Yeah, for sure. But that also brings up something else I'd like to touch base on. It's just the fact of, you know, the tattoo industry as a whole, you do kind of have to have, even in today's society, a little bit of a thicker skin, right? I will say that, you know, it's not how it used to be by any means, but in this industry, you are kind of on your own. You know, you're doing the marketing, you're doing, you know, all the booking, you're doing all the drawing, all that stuff, to where it's a lot on you. So that's something that you have to kind of think about as well, that it does take a certain kind of person to make this happen and have the drive to get to that next level.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. But it is a whole lot easier and a lot easier on your mental health getting into it nowadays. What's some stories you have, Jay?
Yeah, man, I was just thinking, like, we always talk a little bit about sort of like the horror stories from apprenticeships and like sort of like the downside and red flags to watch out for, which is important and you should absolutely know that. But I would say too, there's a different sort of frame you can take, whether you're coming in as an artist or you're coming in as an apprentice, and that is to put on sort of like your student hat, right? This is a beautiful opportunity to sort of learn every single role, position, and function of a tattoo shop. That way, once it's time for you to open your own tattoo shop or your private studio, you know everything in and out. Back for me, like, I'm kind of like dating myself now, but we had a brand new tattoo shop. It was the first one in Kapolei, Hawaii. So we were open every single day. And my rule was from my mentor, if the shop is open, you're here, right? And so my day would start, again, dating myself by coming in and scrubbing the tubes of 10 other artists. And we just have like 2 ultrasonics just piled high with tubes. You just scrub those bad boys.
And you get that
These
splashback,
the pipe cleaners, and they cut through the gloves,
you stab
and then
your
you get the
glove,
blood
and you're
water.
like, I got tetanus for sure.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing is I would spend a couple of hours just scrubbing tubes, mopping the floors, going around, making sure all the artist stations are set up. But I would like kind of go out of my way, not just to watch the artist, but to see like, okay, what machine is he using? How can I sort of like organize the back room? How does this part of the business work? And just sort of like, kind of like taking a step further, because I knew one day like I'm not going to be here, and I want to know how this thing works in and out.
And that's great, because most of the views getting into apprenticeship, you know, it's just heightened that you get in, and then it really dies because like it's a hit on kind of your mental. And there's so much to learn and everything. All it is mindset, right? If you're waking up every day and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go in and kill today, instead of kind of looking at the negatives, especially nowadays, it's a whole lot easier. Now, there are still shops out there that are really kind of that old school mentality, but it's a lot better now. So like going in there with the idea that you want to learn everything when it comes to the business, ask questions, you know, go and do above and beyond. Not only is that going to give you the knowledge that you can eventually open up your own studio someday, but you're also connecting with like the owner, the OGs at the tattoo studio, and showing interest to stay with the company for a long period of time.
That's a big one too, because if you start asking questions just like, oh, you know, how does the studio run? Like, how does the insurance work? How does the rent work? How does they're going to immediately think, oh, why is he asking so many questions about the operations of a tattoo studio when I'm the operator? Oh, what is he going to start his own studio? Yeah, you have to do it in an intelligent way where it's just like, how can I add value to the business? And you know, help
I'm just trying to take a little bit off your plate to be able to help out the shop run more effectively.
As opposed to how do I run my own shop?
Exactly.
Of course. Keep that on the down low. But what you're going to find too is that once you've done this for 6 months, a year, and you kind of have a functioning understanding of how a tattoo studio operates, especially watching content like this, and you're going to end up knowing fairly quickly more than the tattoo shop owner, right? And you'll start seeing like, okay, operations are running this way, and you'll start finding gaps like, oh, we're kind of slow on these days. Have you considered paid advertising? Yelp is calling. What's that about? You know?
Also things like, okay, so that dude priced the tattoo at $300 knowing that it was a $500 tattoo and took a $200 cut as a tip. So, there's a lot of things in there that you could really pick up on very early. And realistically, you know, being in a studio as an apprentice, I was in there more than I was around any significant other or family or any of those things. So that became my family for a very long period of time. And once you're around people for 10 hours a day, they talk. You could pretty much get all the information that you need to do anything if you just listen. You know, as a whole, you don't even really need to ask these questions. They just come up in natural conversation. So just pay attention and try to soak in everything you can. And you'll be ready to rock and roll.
You're also in your apprenticeship too. You're going to experience a lot of poor communication. Okay, tattooers are, you know, they're very good at the art side of things, but when it comes to like the business aspect and the human connection aspect, there's a lot of gaps. Okay, so you're going to learn a lot of what not to do. You're going to see some tattoo artists that are quite disrespectful to their clients. First shop that I worked in, my mentor had a client, that went off and got tattooed by another artist in a different country. And then when he saw that tattoo, when he came in for his next sessions, I'm not tattooing you anymore. He saw it as disloyalty because he went to another artist and he threw away thousands of dollars worth of work out of principle. You know, so you're going to learn a lot of, you know, what not to do. And more importantly, going back to the $200, tip thing is when you see a lot of artists doing that, typically it's a reflection of the leadership in the studio. If the owner is horrible to all of the artists, they ain't going to feel bad about doing that. You know, whereas if you're a good leader and you care about the growth of your artists and you're in the shop, you're making things happen, you're keeping your guys busy, and you eat last. Okay, there's nothing more that I hate when I see an owner of a shop that will fill their books first. Right, when they're still getting a cut of everyone else's work, they'll make sure that their books are filled first before everyone else's. That's when that happens.
Yeah, it all comes down. It all comes down to a respect thing, right?
Yeah.
If you give respect to the people around you, you'll get respect in return. And all it would take, if you are hurting and you have that open communication with like the shop owner and stuff, and you kind of have that kind of rapport, if they actually do care about you, they're going to be willing to help you through a hard time, right?
Yeah.
I realistically never had that. It was just like, figure it out or you're fired. But that's one thing that I try as a owner to be there and actually care about the people that work for me.
Also, in an apprenticeship, this was my experience. I'm not sure if this is unique to me, but my mentor may or may not have had split personality syndrome or bipolar or something like that, because it was very confusing. Some days he was absolutely horrible to me. And then another day he put $50 in my pocket when I'm setting up his tattoo station. Just to kind of, so I could buy some food. And I think it was one of the reasons why I stayed there so long, because I wasn't sure whether or not he was a good or a bad dude. I just didn't know. So yeah, that's
keep you guessing.
Yeah, something that you got to look out for. But you'll see sometimes, even in the most horrible, like if you're having a mentor that's absolutely, brutal to you, sometimes there'll be glimmers of like, oh, they'll actually be a pretty good dude, especially like the Christmas party at the end of the year when everyone goes to the boss's house and gets blind for like 3 days straight. You'll see a different side of everyone. So yeah, you just kind of have to go by how you kind of treated most of the time, I guess. Like if you're treated horrible 90% of the time, it's not worth that 10% when, that people are good to you.
And, realistically, as humans, we have bad days, right? It's not going to be, you could have any job and there's going to be hard days with everything. There's days that me and Zach have some turmoil. You had a bad day, I had a bad day, and I'm just like, don't talk to me, But, then we hug, make up later on in the day and it's back to normal. So you can't put everything in thinking it's going to be perfect. Nothing in life is going to be perfect. It's all in what you set your mind up for, instead of being so upset about that one day just not going perfect, just being like, okay, next day will be better.
Yeah, of course. And I see a lot of that too, where like people almost want to use, not everyone, but in some cases you hear people who are sort of using the mentor being, rude, being a jerk, being whatever, almost as an excuse why they're not having a good time in their apprenticeship. But if you've been like working in retail or working in a restaurant, there's a saying that's like, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. So I would say like be proactive as the mentee, as the apprentice in the shop. And if you're like, you're running around, the shop's clean, everyone's set up, everyone's tattooing, the phone's not ringing, like what are you gonna do? You can hang out and watch tattoo, or ideally, especially if you're in the beginning, start drawing out Flash, start drawing out designs. Like if they see you being proactive in your own education, they're more likely to reach out and want to help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you do have to, you're not going to be like handed lessons.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
You have to, in an apprenticeship, you have to push to get educated. You have to proactively ask questions, watch people tattoo. If you just sit at the front counter and just draw all the time, no one's going to come up to you and just like, hey, it's time for your line work lesson. Come out the back and I'll show you how to do it. And they're like, nah, man.
The more you put into it on your own time, the more you're going to get back.
Yep. I would say like we talk a lot about too, like how do I find balance? I have a family, I have a 9 to 5. And it is important to like, to, of course, prioritize your family. I would say first and foremost, if your family's fallen by the wayside, you're going to burn out and you're going to quit. But I mean, just to be real, I think in my experience, in my opinion, there are going to be seasons of unbalance in your life. You're going to have to make sacrifices and be unbalanced and prioritize your drawing. When you're off, you're not at the shop right now, can you draw some designs to bring in the next morning to show your mentor, right? Like be unbalanced for a little season in your life. That way you can have more balance later on.
Yeah, and to give you an example of like my apprenticeship, I did 4 years. I didn't do anything for like half a decade almost. I remember I was in a share house and I had security bars on my window. Sometimes it felt like I was in prison because there were security bars in the shop and there were security bars on my window. I always had bars in front of me when I was drawing and looking out the window. And I literally just sat at a desk and drew for like 4 years straight. So just going back to what Jay said, there's going to be, if you want to make the apprenticeship route work, there's going to be, a period of time where life kind of gets put on pause.
Yeah, absolutely.
It consumes your life for sure.
And that kind of brings up something for you guys as well. So what are some of your top questions when it comes to getting into an apprenticeship? Make sure you leave some comments down below so we could all connect to you and give you the answers that you need. So one of the other things I very much so remember of my apprenticeship is I was kind of the bodyguard for the shop.
Yeah.
And by all means, I'm not a very big guy, but I have the heart of a lion.
Yeah.
So I did actually kind of enjoy that, but when I was going through, but like, if someone comes in drunk, you were kind of the person that had to get them out of the studio.
Yeah.
No matter what. Now, with that, there's a lot more that goes into it besides just drunk people.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, so I messed up doing this because I was the apprentice, I was the bodyguard, and we had a guy come in asking for money, and he was clearly intoxicated, I don't think on alcohol. Yeah. And he's looking around like, hey, can I get a couple bucks? Like, our shop was in the hood. And we're like, no, but props to this guy, he was an entrepreneur, right? So he came back a couple of days later with like all of this assumingly legitimately acquired art equipment that he got from the art supply. And we bought some paintbrushes, some great paints. So he would come back like every few days. And kind of made it a habit of coming back to our shop, unfortunately.
You know what? I think I had a guy like that too. There was a guy that, would come make a little list. Yeah. Now, of course, I had no involvement in this at all.
Same.
I just said like, we're looking for some Prismacolors, some like art pads. Yeah. And of course I, as a very good person, was like, I know he's probably finding this used at yard sales and stuff.
Yeah, eBay.
Yeah. But I know that I got some art equipment for at least half price.
Was it hot?
Huh?
Was it hot?
Was it hot? Yeah. No, I only do legal activities.
Yeah, okay, sure.
But the wrapper was still on.
Yeah, I think we had a guy like that too. We had this dude that used to come in the studio. Alex was his name. If you watch this,
yeah,
Alex, the taxidermy guy. He was very well known in our shop. He would come in with like taxidermy butterflies and like centipedes and stuff like that. They're actually pretty cool. We bought some of them, but then he just kept coming in again and again and again. It's like you help them out once and they sort of keep coming in. But yeah, anytime there was like an angry customer, our tattoo shop was right next to between a brothel and a methadone clinic. So we were, especially when we're open late on Friday nights, sometimes people would get the wrong address and they'd come in and then it's just like, sorry, man, you're looking for, next door. But based on how they look, I'd tell them to go to the left or the right. Yeah. Depending on what I thought they would be after.
Or to stay.
Or both. Generally, though, if they wanted one, they couldn't afford the other.
Okay, yeah.
So, depending on what kind of night it was. Yeah, anytime there was like an angry customer, like sometimes the owner of our shop had a habit of cancelling the appointment the morning of, especially even if people had traveled, a couple of hours from out of state. If he had like a sore back or whatever, he was just like, hey, man, cancel this appointment. And then it's like, dude, I'm 2 minutes away. I'm around the corner. And then they come in. Yeah. And then my mentor would say on the phone, it's like, don't give them back their deposit. And then they're coming in. It's like, hey, man, I traveled 3 hours. Give me my deposit back. And I'm the messenger. I'm in the middle. And I'm just I'm getting yelled at by the customer. And if I give him what he wants, I'm going to get yelled at by, the owner. Yeah. You can't win. So you're going to get blasted no matter what. Yeah. So you're kind of like almost like the bodyguard, like you said, and punching bag as well. So for angry customers and removing,
And it's not only that, it's also things like people coming in trying to sell internet or all these things. Like if I'm out tattooing, Zach knows, and he's very good at it, just being like, we're not interested, like, taking care of that for me. But realistically, still to this day, if someone's coming in drunk, I absolutely love to handle that situation.
Yeah, we used to get a lot of junkies and stuff coming in too. They'd be like all messed up and they try and take picture frames off the wall and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's an interesting part of the job that is unique to tattooing, but wasn't my favorite. Because I was a shy and timid guy back in my early 20s. I was not all about that. I did not enjoy that part of the job.
Yeah, you didn't have any muscles.
No, I was skinny as hell.
Yeah, there's a lot that comes to tattooing that's outside what you would just kind of realize when you're first getting into it. So these are all really great points to kind of have you guys understand the whole process and all the extra things that come along with it going forward. So you better be prepared.
Absolutely. I would say too is like being aware not just of how to get into an apprenticeship, but how to get out of an apprenticeship.
Yes.
I would say that's sort of like a major rite of passage is leaving your shop, because in all the apprenticeships that I've been in, it's like you want to stay and like repay the debt that the artist has like trained you how to actually tattoo, given you a career, given you your livelihood, but you'll always still kind of be like, in their eyes, an apprentice and lower. Yeah. You're going to have to spread your wings and leave the nest at some point in time. So when is it time to leave?
You just sneak out in the middle of the night.
take your stuff.
That's actually what happens most of the time.
Yeah, that's what I've done.
That is the most common way to exit a shop is you come in the dead of the night and then they come the next day and it's like you were never there.
Yeah.
It's like literally everything in the booth has just vanished.
Yeah, you just block that number, change your number the
Numbers
next day.
blocked, front computer's gone into, clients have been pulled out.
It's
and
kind of
then-
awkward when you see them at Walmart a week later, though.
Oh, no, you gotta move.
It is.
Yeah, you
Move
gotta
states?
go cross country.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole process to that. So I don't really recommend that unless you're in a bad situation, right?
Yeah.
I've had plenty of, I've no real problem with like confrontation or like trying to handle a conversation of that manner. I know that it's never worked out to my favor, right? There's going to be those hard conversations. And, the last one when I was opening up my own studio, the shop I was in was great. I couldn't say anything negative about it. But when I had that conversation, he was just like, get the hell out.
Yeah.
Like I tried to respectfully put in a 2 weeks notice and do like what I thought was the right thing.
Yeah.
But it was just like, get your stuff and leave.
Yeah.
And it was,
And it's so funny when that happens though, because what message does that send to the rest of the art? It says, if I give notice, I'm just going to get fired. So what ends up happening is that the owner of the business doesn't find out that someone's going to leave until the day after it happens, and they have zero time to prepare their business for that.
Yeah.
So it's different than any other industry for sure, but realistically, if you're in a good shop and you're in a place to where they want you to grow, they know what's going to happen. They started out there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like everyone started out working in another studio and then they opened up their own. So it's just a part of the business and something that you realistically as a shop owner, that's on you.
Yeah.
It's something you have to prepare for, something that you realistically will understand is going to happen. It's just trying to do the best for them so you leave on good terms and you could have that, rapport going forward. If they want a guest spot or go on trips, go to conventions together, you still have that going forward.
If you're an apprentice though, and let's just put aside like the abuse or like bad working environment, like what are some indications that you would kind of see yourself as, okay, this is a good time to kind of transition out of the shop and do my own thing?
Yeah.
Also, just if I could just quickly interrupt there, going back to what you said, Jay, before about repaying the debt for working in a tattoo shop, I think that's something that we should cover as well.
Okay.
Every artist will feel entitled to you being in debt to them after you coming up in their shop, right? But the reality is everything that you got in education from that studio was paid for in full 10 times over by your free labor.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, because you think about like whatever the minimum wage is, you multiply that by 4 years of it's like, almost 6 figures, right?
Yeah.
Over a 4-year period. So
I would say that 4 years that's dead. 4 years as an apprenticeship.
Yeah, 4 years. I was thinking more so of like the guys who come in, do 6 months, 1 year. They kind of get how a tattoo shop operates. Be a little respect. 4 years is excessive.
Yeah, I was going to
crazy.
say after 3 years, it's time to walk.
3 years is
Like,
way more. Yeah,
yeah.
I would say 2 years like maximum, to be honest.
yeah.
And if you're not making money after the first year, like if you were doing everything above and beyond and you're able to draw, tattoo, and if you're not making any money, it's time for you to come up with another option. A year without making money
That's
is
insane.
unbelievable in this time.
I wasn't even able to pick up a machine and tattoo myself until I was a year in.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which, that goes with time too, right? Like
Yeah.
nowadays there's so much information out there to where you had to rely on your mentor back then.
Mm-hmm.
You could learn realistically all you need to know to be able to tattoo nowadays with your own time, with videos, all that knowledge. So time definitely changed that for sure.
Yeah.
It's
a 4-year apprenticeship is just unfathomable.
That's crazy.
Nowadays.
Yeah.
To me, like, I didn't, like, I mean, because I was young and naive,
Sure.
I definitely felt like that, like I owed something. But when I look back, it's like, man, that was a transaction. Like I was given a very small amount for a massive chunk of my time. It's just like, dude, everything that I got, I was paid for.
You got to
in
run
full.
around, dude.
Oh yeah, for sure.
so-
I would say in your case, absolutely.
Yeah, but I guess going back what Jay says, like they're 6 months and then you bounce and then you open up a shop. It's a bit brutal.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Do a year or two.
Yeah.
If you're learning and growing in that shop, of course.
Also, so I think this is what you said as well. Always being seen as the apprentice.
Yeah.
That's so true. Because initially when you graduate and you become or get signed off or whatever, there's no one to replace you.
Yeah.
And the coffees still need to be got.
Yeah.
The floors still need to be swept, and it's just like, well, okay, who's the lowest on the food chain? Oh, it's still the guy
you.
that just graduated.
Yeah, I will say that, if you're in a better shop, it'll kind of change too, right? Like if even Zach, which is still technically an apprentice, he's tattooing now and everything, but like, if he's tattooing and I got to go get coffee, am I going to be slightly upset about it? Yeah, because I got to get out and do stuff. But like, you got to do it, right? So it's just, there is kind of like that pyramid, but at the end of the day, we're all there for the same reason. So it's just the mental set of everyone in the studio. With that being said, some big red flags are going to be like sexual harassment. My wife went through this in her apprenticeship, and it's a lot harder for like females getting into the industry because there's unfortunately some creeps out there, right? There's a lot of scumbags that do get into this industry because they're not going to be able to work at a place with HR.
Yeah, so there ain't no HR in a tattoo shop.
Yeah, so that's a big red flag. If anyone's going through anything like that, like it's time to walk away. There are better options out there for you. It's not the end of the world. So your mental health and the things that you go through are way more important than selling your soul to a shop.
Yeah.
So that is one of the main ones I definitely want to touch base on for anyone out there. If you're going through that, you don't deserve it, get the fuck out of there.
Yeah. And that's a lot of our female students with Tattooing 101. Like I've heard that story so many times. Like, they come in, show their portfolio, whatever, owner of the shop takes them on, then starts acting real weird.
Yeah, thinking that they're in a relationship just because they give you a chance.
And then it starts getting more and more like strange, and then after a while they just feel uncomfortable and leave. Like that is so, like that's one of the most common stories that we kind of get. So
One other subject that needs to be touched base on is the fact of people signing contracts whenever you're getting into an apprenticeship. This is something that I actually did, and I know quite a few artists did as well. And one thing that I would like to point out is that these contracts sound really scary, right? It sounds legally binding and all this stuff. You are a private contractor. There is 0% chance that's going to hold up in court. And also, they're not going to hire an attorney.
They're tattooers, not lawyers.
Yeah. So that's one thing that, have you ever had any experiences like that, Jay?
Not in signing contracts like that, but we have had other shop owners coming over and sort of like paying us a visit. These are sort of like the old motorcycle clubs, things like that. So I would say, like, while it's not legally enforceable, I would say be careful first and foremost of what shop you're getting yourself into. If you're getting yourself into a tattoo shop where the tattooing side is more of a front than an actual business, be mindful of that because there can be like physical repercussions.
Yeah, there are some tattoo shop owners that keep it real.
Yeah. So the best rule of thumb for that is stay strapped or get clapped.
Or just don't go into that type of shop in the first place.
Yeah, just don't go in that type of shop in the first place. I was in a studio where I feel like the owner was kind of in the middle of that spectrum, and I was definitely concerned because the next shop that I ended up working was literally 10 minutes up the road, and he said, you can't work within 100 kilometers of my shop, I think, within 10 years. And I told the guy of the shop that I was working, and he's just like, oh, who was the shop that you learn at? And I told him the name, and he's just like, oh, don't worry about that. And it's just like, we've had problems with him before. It's not a big deal. So a lot of the time, it's all, tattooists can come off as like real tough people and like scary and intimidating, but when you really get down to it, most of us are just skinny dudes with poor social skills that sit inside of a room and draw all day that haven't seen the sun in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so all you gotta do is have a really bright flashlight and we're done.
It's kind of like hairdressing in that way. A lot of gossip, a lot of bitchiness or whatever, but it's not, a lot of the time when push comes to shove, it doesn't play out to where you think it's going to happen. Whether or not they get you to sign a contract that you have to stay there or work for a couple of years or whatever, I think it's important also to talk about the structure of an apprenticeship and what you're sort of walking into, right? Or the lack thereof.
Yeah, I was going to say.
The lack thereof, because most apprenticeships, they're really, you just hang around until you can tattoo. That's the plan.
Yeah.
There's no KPIs, there's no key performance indicators, there's no targets that you have to meet. So, for those of you guys that learn better in a structured environment, you can definitely struggle inside of an apprenticeship because a lot of the time you don't know what you should be doing. You'll be sitting at the front counter and it's just like, how do I progress? How do I get to that next level? That's not always super clear.
And you could be like, okay, so what do I need to do to start tattooing? And they're like, I don't know, I'll tell you when it's there.
You're not ready yet.
Yeah. And realistically, they're saying that because they don't know.
Yeah.
what you have to do until you start tattooing. It's just like, okay,
Yeah.
I need more money, so tattoo now.
I would say for most of us too, man, is like we've been brought up following sort of like a step-by-step system or framework. You go to elementary school, you go to middle or junior school, you go to high school or finishing school, then you go to college, then you go, like you have like this natural progression. And then coming into like the art world or a tattoo shop, you don't have that. So when we first built out the Artist Accelerator, we had conversations with like hundreds of people. And that's why it did so well. It's because like, here's a simple 3-phase process with 3 steps in each phase, because now you have like the simple things to focus on step by step by step.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like that can make the learning process so much more efficient, because when you're fumbling around in the dark, you spend time on stuff that isn't what you need right now. There is no point, learning how to draw back pieces if you've never even done a single line on a person's skin before. You should be working on small little designs that are like less than the palm of your hand, because that's what you're going to be doing when you're starting out. And there's no point learning how to, build a website if you can't even draw a straight line.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Which reminds me as well, the whole marketing, the website building, anything to do with getting clients, a lot of that time is sold separately. It doesn't come with the apprenticeship,
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest thing to kind of watch out for here is like, you hear the horror stories of like, for example, having machines or needles thrown at you, like in my apprenticeship, like getting thrown up against the wall, like facing all kinds of like sort of like physical abuse or whatever you want to call it, right? And that sucks. But what sucks more is giving up 2, 3, in your case, 4 years of your life and still being stuck in the same place.
I would much so rather get beat up than waste 4 years of my life.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
And that's the thing, when you come into an apprenticeship as well, even when you learn from a great artist, like again, I said this before, my mentor was sponsored, okay? On paper, he was legit, and you couldn't go to anyone better, but it didn't translate into the learning experience, right? You might learn from a really good artist, but they might not be the best teacher because they're different skill sets. Teaching and tattooing are separate, okay? And sometimes not always the best artist is the best mentor, okay? So when you go through a tattoo apprenticeship, it's highly unregulated and there's no guarantee that you're gonna get what you came for. Okay, it's a roll of the dice.
So at what point do you pull the plug? At what point, like again, putting aside the frustrations or getting stuff thrown at you and things like that, at what point do you realize, hey, maybe this isn't for me or I should look for something else, or do I stick it out?
This is all a personal thing. If you were to the point to where you are absolutely sick for multiple, like let's say a month straight, it's time. There's going to be hard days.
Of course.
There's going to be days you don't want to go to work. But if it is a constant thing and it's affecting your life outside of tattooing or making you not want to tattoo anymore, it's probably the place you're at.
There's also indicators, all right, if your apprenticeship's not going well that you need to look out for. First of all, if you're in a shop where there's 5 other apprentices, bad sign. Okay. Realistically, how many people can you teach at once? If you're tattooing full-time in a studio, okay, and running a business and you've got 5 apprentices, okay.
Realistically, not even one.
Yeah.
So if there's more than one.
If you're in some shops, they're like apprentice factories. They'll have 5 or 6 apprentices, and then if they make it, great. If they don't, they don't.
These are typically paid apprenticeships. Like those apprentices are typically paying to be there.
Yeah.
So it's just another revenue source
stream.
for the shop.
Here's the thing: if you're just wanting to get your license to be able to open up your own shop, it's up to you if you want to stick it out. If that's your goal, stick it out for the next 2 months. Get out there with your license, make your dreams happen. But you don't want it to affect your life or make you even quit tattooing because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we touched briefly kind of like how there needs to be a season of unbalance, especially when you're first getting started. But there's also that needs to be said too in terms of like having a little bit of balance where you don't burn out and end up hating your life. So how do you find that balance when you're first becoming an apprentice?
I feel that when you first start, you won't have that. It takes time to realistically be able to regulate all the things you need to do because it's a new lifestyle. It does take time, so it's going to be stressful that when you first start out, but it will get easier with time. So don't base your whole apprenticeship off the first week, first month. Once you get a better understanding of how the shops ran, you will have a better understanding on how to structure your life and outside of the tattoo studio as well. Because like with everything, there is a balance. You need to think about what all you need to do in the studio, but you also have outside things like family. You have to do things that you enjoy to be able to keep that artistic mind flow going. If you just think of it as a job, you're gonna get burnt out, you're not gonna be happy. And realistically, That's the biggest thing I see people quit. Like just that.
They go too hard.
Yeah.
And then they get
They
burned
can't
out.
sustain that.
Yeah.
And also the shop sees them doing above and beyond. And when they drop off, they're like, oh, they don't care anymore.
Yeah,
Game over.
They write them off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a couple tips on how to have a little bit of a life.
Yeah.
This is the advice that I would have given myself if I could go back in time. First of all, there's a lot that needs to be done in the early stages, right? And you can dramatically reduce that work if you narrow your focus. Okay. In the beginning, I tried to learn every style at once. I was doing realism, I was doing new school, I was doing neo-trad, which meant I had to do a lot more drawing to get to the level of competency in any one of those different styles. Had I have focused on one thing, I would have needed a lot less input to get to the bar of competency, which would have given me more time outside of work to live my life. Another thing that you can do as well is plan, okay? You have to do a lot of drawing in tattooing. If you can batch what you're going to draw each week on the Sunday, say on this day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'm going to draw this, this, and this, compile all the references that you're going to need in advance so that when you do go to draw on that day, boom, you can just get straight into it and knock out as many designs as you can, so that you're just kind of being more efficient with the time that you do have. Giving yourself that little bit of structure, it's going to make you more efficient, which means you're going to have more time outside of tattooing to just live your life.
Yeah,
Great
and
tip.
the biggest thing that I could say for everyone watching out there, if you're wanting to get into this for a living, is if I was to go back in time and talk to myself back then, there is so much time that you have that you don't realistically think about. So the time that I was getting off my apprenticeship, going out drinking and partying,
Yeah.
that was a waste of time. I could have gotten to that point way faster if I cut out the things that I did not need in order to fill them with things that would benefit me as a person. So realistically, there's probably 4 hours of your day that you're spending doing something that you aren't going to benefit from.
You were drinking 4 hours a day?
I mean, yeah, you start drinking, you keep that
Damn,
rolling,
bro.
dog.
Yeah, no, I like to party, but 4 hours a day it's a lot, man. Like,
What?
yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know, but
He ain't drinking.
I'd say as well as I say this to a lot of aspiring artists. If you're ever looking for an extra couple of hours a day, check the screen time on your phone.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, that's huge, man.
Yeah,
That's
and
huge.
even besides that, the hours that you spend watching your Netflix series at night, there is time that you have available that you could put into your dreams. It's just having the push to make it happen. With that being said, that is the video going over everything involving getting into apprenticeship, what to look out for, and I hope this was able to help you guys better understand the structure and what to prepare yourself if you are wanting to get into an apprenticeship. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.